and 3 counties, there's one Metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails, and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Metro Council business No, it's a work session meeting or is it a business meeting?
It is a business meeting.
It is a business meeting. Thank you, Connor. I'm going to call the Metro Council business meeting to order for May 30th, 2023, and ask our clerk, Connor, to call the roll for attendance.
Thank you, President Peterson. Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councilor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councilor Wong.
Present.
Councilor Simpson.
Present.
Councilor Nolan is excused today, and President Peterson.
I am here. Thank you. Much appreciated. We should play the safety video for in-person attendees before we start the agenda.
Hi, I'm Justin Dunlap, and I'm the department head stagehand electrician at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. Safety's a big part of my job. From electrical, making sure that I stay up to date on the NFPA codes and regulations, to rigging, where we make sure that everything is safely suspended overhead, to egress, ensuring that our audiences, performers, and technicians have the safest possible route in case of emergency. I'm out here at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and you're in the Metro Regional Center. Please note that we're on the 3rd floor of the building. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue.
Great. Thank you. Let's move on to public communication. I will now open public communication on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll be managing a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting that raise hand button. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button is at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. So for those testifying on Zoom today, I'll call your name and you'll see a window pop up asking you to accept a promotion to a panelist. Once you accept that promotion, you'll rejoin where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. So with that, President Peterson and councilors, we have not had any written testimony submitted. However, we have had one person sign up in advance to testify. So let me just pull up their name and see that they're in the Zoom audience. One moment, apologies, lost my notes. All right, so first up we have Laura Golino de Lovato. So Laura, I'll go ahead and promote you up. All right, Laura, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Great, thank you, Connor. Good morning, President Peterson and council members. My name is Laura Golino de Lovato. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Pilot Project. We are a nonprofit organization that provides housing placement services and support to the most vulnerable and lowest income older adults throughout Multnomah County. We've been in business for almost 54 years, and we average about 600 placements and eviction preventions every year. As you may know, the population of homeless older adults is growing. And in fact, the recent Built for Zero data indicated that there are 106 people who are homeless who are over age 70. That is just appalling. I am here today to follow up on a letter that I sent to all of you, along with my colleagues, Brandy Tuck, Executive Director of Path Home, and Caleb Coder, Executive Director of Cultivate Initiatives, about the extremely urgent issue of the Joint Office of Homeless Services underspend, I should say extreme underspend, of the Supportive Housing Services, or SHS, funds for this current fiscal year ending June 30th. I think my letter, our letter, lays out very specifically some of the biggest, most common concerns that we and other joint office contractors have. And I just wanted to come here today to tell you how important and critical these dollars are. I was involved with the Supportive Housing Services measures creation, advocating for it, working on it, because I, as many other service providers, knew that these dollars would be instrumental in making a huge difference. And they have been, those dollars that we have been able to get. But they do absolutely zero good when they are not being released to the service providers who are doing the work on the ground. And I can tell you that every single service provider agency in Multnomah County, whether they're a joint office contractor or not, is working hard with a singular goal of getting homeless people housed, stabilizing them in that housing, and then moving on to the next person. It is so critical that Metro act swiftly and urgently to get dollars out the door today to service providers like Pilot Project who could put that money to work right now, especially in the form of regional long-term rent assistance vouchers, or as I like to call them, Bobby vouchers, in honor of the late Bobby Weinstock. Thank you so much for your consideration and action.
Thank you, Laura. Much appreciated for all the work that you do every day. I think the entire council appreciates the letter and the information. I think we would probably love to get direct information from you according to the corrective actions that we are working on to make sure that our counties are on track to their local implementation plans, and to help the oversight committees, both at the county level and at the Metro Regional Oversight, as well as the planning body, right, that we have in place to look to the future of not just 3 months out, but what needs to happen over the next year to 5 years to the end of this measure. So much appreciated for all of your hard work on a daily basis. And you're right, we need to make sure that all 3 counties are doing as much as they possibly can. Even with the headwinds that they have, we need to make sure we're doing more and better. So thank you.
Thanks, President Peterson and council members.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll give folks in the audience another second or two to get their hand up if they would like to testify on non-agenda items. Once again, that button's at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. And with that, I don't see any hands going up. President Peterson.
Great, thank you. With that, I will close the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items, and we will move on to our consent agenda. Today's consent agenda now consists of one item, resolution number 23-5338, for the purpose of adding 6 new projects authorized by Congress through congressionally directed spending to the 2021 through 24 MTIP and allowing the start of preliminary engineering activities. Do I have a motion?
So move.
It's been moved by Councilor Rosenthal. Do I have a second?
Councilor second.
I believe Councilor Simpson actually did that by a nanosecond. Seconded by Councilor Simpson. Any further discussion, colleagues?
Just one, if I might, President Peterson, I just might note the happiness that it includes some work on Hall Boulevard, which is of great importance to the city of Tigard, some safety improvements on some intersections. So just a very nice note.
Thank you for that. Seeing no other hands raised, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. We'll move on to other business, to the Metro's Public Engagement Guide. Our first work session today is a discussion on Metro's Public Engagement Guide. Metro's current principles of citizen involvement were adopted in 1997. Let me restate that. That is an incredible date. I left Metro as a planner in 1998. So it's been a while. Metro staff is proposing to update the guiding principles to bring them into alignment with Metro's strategic plan to advance racial equity. Our best practices for meaningful engagement that we know from around the world and from in our backyard, and Metro's values itself. So today we have Gloria to give us a presentation and introduction and introduce other folks that may be here to present with her. Gloria.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. I am going to introduce Leah, who is going to kick us off in this presentation. And Leah is online.
Leah, you should be promoted up now. Oh. Yeah, Leah, we can see you, but we cannot hear you. And I see that you're unmuted on Zoom, so I'm not sure what the issue is. We still can't hear you.
I can get us started if needed.
Yeah, I think that might be good.
Okay. Well, good morning, councilors and Council President Peterson. I am Gloria Pinzon Marin. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the agency's principal community engagement lead, previously serving in waste prevention and environmental services in a similar role. We're here today seeking your guidance as we prepare to update Metro's Public Engagement Guide. The first step of that process being refreshing our guiding principles for meaningful public engagement to bring them up to current best practices and make sure that they reflect Metro's values and your direction. The Public Engagement Guide was last updated in 2013, and a lot has happened at Metro and in the world since then. The Metro Council has adopted many important policies and plans that guide our work, including the Strategic Plan to Advance Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, and a new Parks Bond and strategic framework. All of these changes provide direction and guidance of how we do our work, and also the impacts of COVID pandemic and Oregon wildfires have influenced the way that we do engagement. We are really excited to have this opportunity and today and over the next few months to work with you to craft a public engagement guide that serves you well as policymakers so that you can make informed decisions and reflects your commitment to keeping our promises and building back better. This project offers the chance to apply what we've learned in the last decade to a new set of shared principles and practices that helps us build public trust and increase public participation in Metro Council decisions. Welcome, Leah.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I would. Hi. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm Leah Wawaioli. I'm the Interim Director of Communications at Metro, and I'm really proud to be here today with Gloria, who is a longtime community engagement specialist at Metro and has recently stepped into a new role as our community engagement lead, which includes this wonderful project.
Thank you.
And if I may interrupt both of you, thank you so much for showing up in person today. I want to say we have been trying to have as much flexibility in our counselors' lives and our staff lives, and we did not intend for you to have to present to a empty dais today. We did not know that everybody was going to end up off camera. I just want to say I appreciate it because I got a new puppy on Saturday. So this gives me a little bit more flexibility, just like everybody else with childcare and other work. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being there in person. Very much appreciated. And please don't take it as a disengagement from the council, because we are all here and engaged. But I just want to say that we're going to work on our own rules here to make sure that we have more notice from counselors, to make sure that we can make sure that it's either virtual or hybrid, right? So that we don't have this happen again. But I very much appreciate you both showing up and being here for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. And I appreciate at least being able to see you all on screen. It's no problem. In this new world that we're living in, it's to be expected. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the project that we're here to discuss with you and hear your feedback about. During the presentation, you will hear me describe what is on the slides, and that is intentionally for the benefit of members of the public and people who learn best hearing things, and you know, folks that want to be informed and participate. And so before we get into the project, I do want to talk about the different ways that Metro connects to the public. If we could go to slide 2, please. Slide 2 shows a banner of images of adults and youth connecting with Metro projects or programs out in nature or talking around a table during engagement opportunities. And there's a list of categories above that with examples of ways that Metro departments connect with the public. Some of those include education for conservation or waste reduction, community partnerships to develop or implement programs or develop engagement plans, civic engagement like advisory committees or council meetings where people can testify. There's long-range planning projects throughout all departments that seek to involve the public in decision-making related to their particular work. There's even customer service at our recycling facilities or art and culture venues. Each department has unique needs and practices around engagement, and so as you can see, public engagement and outreach can take a lot of different forms. The guide will account for these different ways of interaction with the public, but we'll be focusing on strengthening guidance on inclusion practices, partnership development, and outreach related to decision-making processes, including consultation with tribal governments as sovereign nations. Slide 3, please. Slide 3 shows a small image of the current public engagement guide and a list of bullet points that I'll explain now. As we mentioned earlier, the guide was last updated 10 years ago, and which was the next time after 1997 that the guiding principles were reviewed and looked at. As the region's metropolitan planning organization designated by the federal government, we are required to have a guide that informs the public about our regional transportation work. However, we want to expand the benefit of the guide to include information about and for all departments. Our intention is that the guide becomes a tool for members of the public, Metro staff, and Metro Council to strengthen our engagement practices. A challenge we do face is that no two projects or engagement plans are the same. Each project may have unique goals, potential impacts, geography, scale, or key audiences for involvement or interested parties to keep informed. Also, I may hear during this process challenges or barriers from staff or community or the council that cannot be solved by content in a guide. In that case, I will be communicating back to you and the Chief Operating Officer for your support and consideration in addressing those challenges. Next slide, please. Slide 4 shows you a list of the expected touch points with you. Today, we are reviewing the guiding principles for meaningful engagement that will hopefully set a pathway for the public engagement guide update. And so we are early in this process, and we do expect to come back to you in the summer and fall, leading up to potential adoption of an updated guide in November of 2023. There is a lot of important content that we will consider and things that we've already heard, but there will need to be a prioritization process based on our timeline and current best practices. It may be possible that some of the topics that are important to add to the guide may need to take longer to develop than the next few months can allow. In which case, we'll create a work plan to gather any necessary information and draft that content to be added as either an appendix to the guide or change it in the future after November 2023, excuse me. Slide 5, please. Okay, so as communication folks, we're always thinking about words. And so slide 5 shows a definition of a couple keywords we are using for this conversation as context. And we know that words matter because they have the power to create positive action and also bring people together. First, a guiding principle is a values-based idea that influences behavior and decisions regardless of a change in projects or goals. We created a set of principles that are specific yet broad enough to allow for flexibility so that they can be applied across different departments. They also reflect some of the work we have already been doing for years. Meaningful public engagement is something that can impact decision-making. It's inclusive of all potentially impacted perspectives, relationship-based, and it's trauma-informed. Also, and very important, is that it's responsive and considerate of the communication and engagement needs of participants. Making sure that we have a trauma-informed approach to communication can reduce barriers of participation for many members of the public and increase the likelihood of maintaining sustained relationships over time, assuming that we're also applying other best practices. Slide 6. Slide 6 shows the progression of the guiding principles related to public engagement since 1997. The principles you'll see today reflect adaptations from those past versions, which support best practices and consistency, and they also will help us meet federal and state requirements around public engagement. Slide 7. Slide 7 shows a summary of the input we received on the first draft of the guiding principles, which included 13 guiding principles and a set of expected benefits next to them. There's also a screenshot of the Public Engagement Review Committee. And, sorry, I lost my place. And that committee is made up of at least 9 people. They are engagement professionals or community advocates and county engagement staff from across the region. They're charged with advising Metro Council on the Public Engagement Guide updates, and they provided feedback on the first and second drafts of the guiding principles for meaningful public engagement. Their input included themes that could be applied to either the language of the guiding principles or ideas around the application of the guiding principles. This group was particularly supportive of including accessibility in communications for people living with disabilities, as well as meeting convenience when planning engagement opportunities and language and culture. Adaptive timelines, transparency, and impact of input on decision-making were also very important to the committee. Slide 8. And slide 8 shows a summary of the input that I heard from you all as our counselors when we had briefings. thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. The input that we heard has either been applied to the language of the guiding principles or will be considered for the potential application into the update of the public engagement guide, and will inform future conversations with you and staff and the public. There was interest from this council body to add capacity building for both community-based organizations and individuals we engage with in our engagement process. That's been added. Additionally, though we celebrate and are committed to engaging and centering the needs of communities of color or people living with disabilities or low income, for example, you noted a desire to make sure that we're reaching all audiences and stakeholders in the region, and that includes businesses or environmental or labor organizations, as well as folks that are further out away from the Portland area and that are within our region or are impacted by the work that we do. In terms of engagement or project processes, we also heard from some of you that you want more opportunities to hear from staff and residents directly. Next slide, please. Slide 9 shows the list of the 8 proposed guiding principles resulting from a summary of all the input we received, including from the Committee on Racial Equity. The blue text represents the originally proposed draft 2, and the orange represents the changes made that related to the language of the guiding principles from various audiences. Some suggestions or questions we heard that are not represented here but are worth mentioning are that Metro should consider a plan for action for public engagement during emergencies such as a natural disaster or another instance of something like the COVID pandemic. They also mentioned, a lot of people also asked about the mention of businesses within our description for principle number 1, and they were curious about what Metro meant by business. Some were specifically encouraging us, Metro, to engage with small businesses because they serve as cultural and community hubs in many places, and to consider looking at specific sectors related to Metro work. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a clean version of the same guiding principles without the markups. And Council President Pizar and I would like to ask for permission if we could take turns reading them one by one. If we were here, I was going to suggest order from your physical location. Maybe we can do it by alphabet, and I can start with number 1.
Why don't I go ahead and call on folks?
Okay, that works. Thank you. So I'll read number 1, and then somebody else can take number 2. So okay, number 1 is public participation is an essential part of Metro's decision-making.
Transparency about decision-making is fundamental to successful public service. And I'll popcorn it over to Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson. Meaningful public engagement processes apply equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies and tools to help identify and address the needs of impacted, underserved, and historically excluded communities.
Go ahead, Councilor Gonzalez.
Number 4, engagement and communications are accessible, informative, timely, and inclusive of a rich diversity of lived experiences and perspectives.
Number 5, Councilor Rosenthal. And you're on mute, Councilor.
Oh, somehow, don't know how that happened. Collaboration and capacity building efforts with community-based organizations, programs, initiatives, and individuals that are impacted, underserved, or historically excluded are essential to address regional issues equitably.
Number 6, Councilor Huang.
Great, thank you. Intergovernmental collaboration, coordination, and consultation are essential to address regional issues holistically and efficiently.
Thank you. Deputy Council President, Councilor Lewis.
Evaluation of engagement activities during and after a project encourages responsiveness, growth, and process improvement.
And lastly, adaptive project timelines allow for meaningful engagement with the most impacted audiences early and throughout the project. And back over to you, Gloria.
Thank you so much for joining me in reading those guiding principles. Typically wouldn't do that, but because we are really talking about language today, felt that it was really important for us to be on the same page about the principles that we are speaking about today. Before we get into discussion, because I am looking forward to your feedback, I would like to show a couple more slides just with an example of some of the ways that we could reflect on some of these guiding principles. And if we could move to slide 11. So slide 11 shows an example of some of the ways we could reflect on the guiding principles, considering how they could impact the public engagement guide content or strengthen our internal or council decision-making processes, or identify the strengths that we have as an agency to apply those guiding principles, or things that we need in order to do so successfully. So I can't read all those questions, but I think that was a good summary of what they say from here. Slide 12 shows an example of applying this to draft number 7 of the guiding principles. Thank you. And I would like to say that, for example, in order for us to be successful in evaluating our public engagement practices, we might need to create templates that can be shared across staff with different projects. And we might need to tap our friends in the Data Resource Center, talk about how we could use more mapping data or practices around research to inform our practices and evaluation. It could also look like needing more staff training, or talking about our project planning processes, ensuring and securing time for evaluation during the processes or implementation. And that does conclude my presentation for you all today. I'm really looking forward to your feedback, and the next slide has a question for you specifically about the guiding principles. And of course, this is all related to the public engagement guide, so I welcome other thoughts that you might have.
Thank you, Gloria. And as per norm, I am always impressed by your community engagement, including getting us engaged in reading all of that out. So thank you. With that, counselors, do you have any questions, suggestions, edits? I guess, Counselor Simpson, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Peterson. Thank you so much, Gloria, for that presentation. That was really good. I want to thank you for including a lot of the comments that we as counselors had about into your presentation. But I did have one question.
Oh, I cannot hear Counselor Simpson anymore.
He froze, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Well, why don't we go? Counselor Simpson, you froze. Why don't you reinstate?
Okay. Can y'all hear me now? I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. As we continue to work on strengthening relationships across the region, will we translate these guiding principles into the languages spoken so that we can make sure everybody is included in knowing how Metro functions and engages with the public?
That's a great question, Counselor Simpson. I do hope that we can translate these into the languages of the communities that we serve. And because the future guide will, one of the intention is to have information that's helpful for the public to support them in engaging with Metro. I would hope that that information is also translated.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Wong.
Great. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Gloria, for all the work on this. You know, I've been doing community engagement at or with Metro for quite a while, and it's great to see kind of all the new principles and concepts on paper that we're trying to live up to. You know, two things I was thinking about for the principles was just really having some thought about what we do after the engagement's done in terms of follow-up and like making sure that community members who we've engaged know that their input was valuable, and you know, staff and council took their feedback and really considered it and what the outcome was. So if we're getting engagement on, you know, a regional transportation plan or something, like, you know, we've done that with parks before. We've actually gone back and had a follow-up session to report back on this is how your feedback mattered. And I think that having that kind of principle would be really valuable. And then just kind of like more big picture wise, you know, we have our capacity building grants for other organizations or for nonprofits. And I was hoping also just to have in the engagement plan a little bit more about how we think of engagement as, you know, community capacity building. And it's not like we're just in for, you know, a week or a couple hours to ask questions about a specific topic, but, you know, how are we then taking that as an opportunity to build, you know, leadership and expertise with the communities that we work with. So it's not just like, you know, drop in and, you know, get the feedback and leave, but like, you know, how are we advancing that partnership and kind of making sure that when we come back for another round of engagement in the future on another topic, folks are ready to engage with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to apologize in advance for going back a little bit into the Wayback Machine. The original draft guidance takes me back to the time when I was co-chair of the Metro Public Involvement Committee. And it was frustrating because one of the problems we had back then was trying to generalize the message to the public. So I get caught up in the term public versus community. I would prefer to see something, I would call it a community engagement activity, simply because we are always engaging different communities, and depending on the project, depending on the office, whether it's an information community, whether it's a parks community, whether it's a minority community and so forth. I think the public, it also underscores the fact that we do have a public information aspect, which is more broad. In other words, for example, when we announced, for example, that the zoo, that we lost a bear at the zoo, or when that the convention center is open for cold weather establishments or hot weather respite. These are public information things we do to the general public, which are just informational aspects, and they're not really community involvement. So I like the emphasis on community. I think we should be a little careful when we use public as opposed to community, because most of our stuff is community-based. And in that light, one of the important points of one of the principles that I think is implicit, but perhaps not entirely spelled out, is that in each time we develop, we have a project, or we have a concern, or we have an outreach, we need to identify what communities are involved, because there's many different kinds. Some of them are economic communities. Some of them, in my case, for example, the city councils are a community. We need to identify them and what their particular interest is, and to make sure that the image, or I should say the messaging or the information provided, is particularly relevant to the communities involved. And so this is a complex process, but I think that's how Metro operates a little bit differently than a lot of groups, because we have such a disparate group of projects and outreaches in various areas, everything from transportation to memorial cemeteries. So those are just my general comments, but a lot of good work, and the principles I basically am very much in accordance with.
Thank you, Counselor. And I do agree with you that the process for engagement planning and identifying audiences is very complex, and that is one of the reasons why some of the principles are very broad, because we want to provide flexibility for the application. And I think in the guide, we can be more specific about what we mean by community, what we mean by public, and consider folks that have been historically excluded and folks that have been historically empowered and involved in our processes, and should be informed as well.
Thank you. And I just might add, and at some point we can stress that that we are cognizant of the need to identify the specific needs of individual communities and their specific constellations, and that goes into our process, that we don't develop a one-size-fits-all kind of community engagement effort.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thanks so much. I really appreciate the work that gets done on community engagement from the Metro perspective, because we first recognize that some of the people we need to hear the most from are folks who don't raise their hand and say, yes, I want to talk to government. And some of that is about how we approach engagement, but also who we are as an agency. And I think we've done a lot to change so that we are informed on how we can go meet those communities where they are and get input from them. And one of those ways is through making sure that we compensate people for their time when it is a significant amount of time. Will this guide set some of those best practices for making sure that people are made whole for their time in terms of engagement sessions that we offer? A pretty standard set of accommodation and or things like childcare, meals, et cetera? Or is that kind of the work that comes in the implementation side?
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. Yes, the guide, the content in the guide will have some guidance around stipends and other efforts that we could do to reduce barriers to participation, taking into account the unique needs of each community member. And that includes normalizing and just incorporating practices to make sure that we're being inclusive of people living with disabilities as well. Because we know one of the things that we heard, particularly one of our PERC members from the Public Engagement Review Committee is blind, and expressed that oftentimes when people know that particular accommodations are going to be made automatically, they're more likely to just show up because they are interested in terms. And I would say that is also true of people that don't use English as a first language.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I do hope that on some of those that we update our practices more often than we will come back to the guide, because technology and kind of best practices will change faster. So I understand this guide needs to be evergreen, but hopefully we can continue to be on the forefront of that work and, not follow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Gloria and team, for this work. As others have mentioned, much better than I can probably. It's really important that we're doing this work and that we've invested in our staff's ability to capture our best practices, to launch them in a toolkit, to really ask ourselves really deeply, comprehensively about what it means for us as an agency to do that, especially with what the way lockdown changed how we had to connect with people and how the disparities became deeper and wider. not only in terms of like the outcomes that people face in their lives, but also in the way that they access information and that they can hear from Metro. So, I don't really have a comment or a question beyond what's already been shared. I know that in our individual briefings as well, we were able to dive deeper into kind of like the mix of how engagement at Metro is chaired, the way that Metro's engagement has changed, over this last decade to be from, maybe isolated to a few committees. Like, so we have these legacy committees that are like just there. And then we've created all these other really active, dynamic committees. So it's like all these cycles happening, with cycles living in maybe some of our more traditional, that's the public engagement committee, but that's also the MPACs and other things that we use to engage leaders at different levels, right? So I guess if I was to request one thing, is that I really feel like Metro needs to reinvigorate the way that we do the kind of the digital as well, the way that we engage people without necessarily having them come to us, something that I know you hold really deeply in your heart, in ways that of getting outside of MRC, getting outside of our Metro committee structure, getting outside of the kind of the rigidity of the way that work has been done. So none of this is new to you. Just like, I'm adding more like logs to this fire of work that you're doing, pa que le siga, so you keep going, and just feeling really supportive and hopeful of the outlook. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Councilor Gonzalez. All your input is very welcome and appreciated.
Okay, just a couple things. I really appreciated the one-on-one conversations with you as well, Gloria, and I really felt like you were listening for understanding. And so just a couple of comments based on all of the information that you've put together. I think in the first slide, you had the different types of decisions, engagement, and you had Metro Council. But I think where we need to be more specific is the different ways in which the Metro Council does outreach and the support that the Metro Council needs when they are seeding an idea versus an existing program or an existing project. Right now there's not a standard way for us to access staff to help us figure out what the new thing is going to be, right? And how to bring people into that. So I think there's that support of Metro Council itself. We are not a separate entity. We need to rely on the staff of both communications and community engagement in order to seed something to become something. And that how we engage with council office, right, is part of that, and what council office can do and what staff can do. And I think we need to figure out how to put all of that together. These things don't just spontaneously appear in Metro Council's head. They come from some places, right? And we're harnessing that, but we can't do it ourselves. So I think that's something that would be very helpful to be more clear on as we move forward, whether that's in this draft or whether that's part of the work plan with the decision-making process work that we're doing. But I think we need to clarify it and codify it. The second part in that is who in the decision-making process should be buying off on community engagement plans, in terms of just having eyes from different angles onto the same problem. Always help strengthen something like this, to make sure that we are truly seeing it from all angles. And the third, and we talked a little bit about this, and I just didn't see this exact language, although I think you tried to encapsulate it. It was the minimum that we should be expecting on each of those different decision-making types, the minimums that we expect, with the allowing for tailorization per the, what we're seeing in the lay of the land. But I am afraid that we have made an assumption that everybody has, the 90% of the population has access to us as a council or a staff person. And somehow I want to make sure that we're not assuming, because when we assume, we make mistakes, right? And so how do we make sure that we're in a continuous learning environment where we are testing our assumptions about who has access and who does not have access? Because it really has become a true issue across the broader spectrum of the assumptions around access. So just trying to figure out what that minimum is.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting concept. I do remember us discussing minimum expectations around engagement, and I think what's important is to recognize that that each project is unique, and so the identification of audiences and even tactics for engagement must be unique and responsive to those particular audiences, depending on the project. And so I would be interested in exploring minimums around process and having more conversations as an agency about what you mentioned around decision making. I will share that I feel that would be helpful for staff as well to understand what the expectations are, to just make sure that we're on the same page, not only within our leadership within each department, but with council. And so opening up those ways of communication might be really helpful. I will also say that sometimes it's in response to your first suggestion around having a standard way for you all to access staff, to also inform and develop new programs or ideas. I think that it would be really helpful just to have more access to council and to understand when things change, why they're changing. That way we can have shared understanding. And I do have a slide on suggested topics, and this is one of them that I do feel is really important, especially since we do have different practices across each department. I'm hoping to learn more. I am early in this process. I want to learn more about what each department is doing and figure out ways that we could coordinate better so that we can move our work forward together.
Yeah, I think what we talked about is that Metro as a whole has a entire broad spectrum of thought leaders and groups, nonprofits, coalitions that want to engage at Metro, not in one department or another department, but they want to engage with council decision-making, they want to engage with staff decision-making. And the assumption that we only talk in the departments to who we think a parks stakeholder is, or who we think, right, a thought leader in parks is, when in reality, we need to start with the assumption of the big tent that everyone needs to be brought up to speed of what we're doing and what the decision-making process is and what the timeline and how to access the information. Like, that's the kind of minimum I'm looking for, is that we are Metro in a big sense. And there are even the folks in the housing field would like to know what's going on in parks now, because we have a bucket of money over there, but they're also very interested in it. So it's not cutting off people just because they don't seem to fit into the department stakeholder. There's a much broader spectrum of people that we should be getting information out to. And that's what I mean by minimums, is that we can't look at it in a silo. We have to look at it as though we are Metro, no matter where we are sitting, out in the field, in the zoo or the parks, or whether we're inside, working on the transfer station. We are Metro. So we need to make sure everybody feels like they've heard what the next decision could be and how they could get involved, and then tailor it to the specifics of what the department is trying to do, right?
Yes.
So I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you so much for clarifying, and I will keep that in mind.
Thank you. And lastly, I'll just say, I think the intent is to make sure that all businesses are heard. Small businesses have the hardest access, I think, but we should not be assuming that just because medium to large size companies are in our region may have access to a chamber or have access to a business alliance. We should not be assuming that they should not hear directly from us. I think that not hearing directly from us allows for a lot of misinterpretation in the game of phone. And so while we may have tailored solutions to small businesses, again, a minimum to the broader spectrum of hearing directly from us is more important for all businesses than to, again, allow that misinterpretation to occur.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if that hasn't brought up other comments, then I think we can close this out. I just want to say again, thank you both for being in person there today and for all of the good work, and really looking forward to this update.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did want to get a sense of if folks are feeling, I heard from a couple of you that you felt supportive of the current version. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to hear from all of the counselors to see if they feel comfortable supporting the current version of the guiding principles.
Counselors, you're just looking for the guiding principles, not the entirety of okay.
Yeah, not the whole guide or the full discussion. And I do want to know that I did hear a suggestion to add something around follow-ups with community and relation to ongoing relationship building.
I guess I don't know how to add this, Gloria, but in the guiding principles, I would just like to articulate that we are not going to make assumptions about who has access and who doesn't have access, that we are going to test those assumptions. And I don't know, it's a testing of assumptions and a testing of how do we talk to everybody. So I guess I don't know how to put that into your guiding principles or how to add a word here or there, but I would like to see that reflected, that we are not going to make assumptions going into the future about who has access and who has not.
Thank you. Thank you. I do feel like that's very related to application. And I think that that's something that we can note in description of application.
I would appreciate that. And I think I would be willing to buy off on that with that change. Counselors, are we going to get thumbs up? Okay, we got thumbs up. You're good to go with that extra wording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
No, thank you. All right. Counselors, we'll move on to our next presentation, which is the High Capacity Transit Strategy Update. My dog wants in. Apologies for the barking in the background. Our next work session is the High Capacity Transit Strategy and Draft Report. We last discussed this item back in January. We gave input on the readiness tiers. Staff is here today to seek feedback on the draft report, particularly the actions and recommendations for implementing high capacity transit network vision. Staff will also review next steps for the HCT strategy update as the effort merges with the 2023 RTP update. With that, I will turn it over to Allie Holmquist.
And thank you for having me today. I am excited to talk about the work that we've done with our working group of partners to get to this final milestone for the high capacity transit strategy update. Next slide, please. The last time that I was here in January, we were talking about the vision, and I'm happy to share that the system analysis that we're doing is showing that we're delivering what we hoped for as far as regional outcomes, which we really base the criteria on our regional goals as well as the federal criteria for funding. But compared to the system projected by 2040 in the last regional transportation plan, we're seeing significant increases in ridership, an increase in job accessibility around 20% across low, mid, and high wage jobs, as well as a similar increase for equity-focused areas. And then also reductions in travel time, so up to 14 minutes, but about 5 minutes on average across the corridors. Next slide, please. And then what we heard in those January discussions was that it was important to consider as well all the ways that we can grow our transit network to be reducing transit deserts and do that in a way that's regionally balanced. Look at additional solutions for improving those tier 3 and 4 corridors that are really regionally significant, but not yet showing readiness for a high capacity investment, but definitely are showing need for other types of transit investment. And then also making sure that we have an approach that continues to emphasize getting current regional priorities that we're working on now in the ground as we look to develop a clear strategy for advancing work toward those tier 2 emerging priorities with partners. And this was something clearly supported by stakeholders and also in the community and small business outreach that we did this winter. Next slide, please. And related to this feedback, I mentioned this before, but I wanted to mention again that high capacity transit is just one part of the broader transit strategy, really that next step from taking frequent or better bus to the next level so that we can build from already elevated service to be providing that roadway priority and those enhanced amenities that further increase capacity where the most people are traveling. So to illustrate this, the demand for those tier 2 corridors is really high in 2040, around the 100 to 200,000 potential trip level, really indicating a need for those elements like the larger buses with more space, the all-door boarding, the improvements at stations that allow for people to board faster and more efficiently, all that increase capacity beyond just the existing service that provides. And then at the tier 3 level, the floor is further down to around 25,000 potential trips. Lots of people that we can make the bus better for, but not indicating the need for that highest capacity investment. And then at tier 4, more down to the tens to thousands level of potential trips. Still a lot of people that we need to improve transit for, but again, not at that highest level. And then just thinking about regional balance, because readiness varies across the region, advancing regional balance really meant considering all parts of the region for investment at a scale consistent with that current need and readiness for high capacity investment. So in some areas that meant strengthening connections sooner, and in other areas, more time to develop the transit supportive environment. Next slide, please. And the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan Transit Network really shows how the broader vision uses all of these tools in the transit toolbox to expand the coverage of the local transit network, also improve frequency on most arterial streets, make the bus better on those key congested corridors, and then provide that highest level of investment along major travel corridors. And so while the timeline for a high capacity investment for some of those lower corridor tiers is longer term, being included in the vision really reinforces the need for applying these tools to begin to grow service so that we can work to get what we need in place first to then successfully take transit to the next level in the future. And it's something that's already helping inform investment decision-making, like the Better Bus program as an example that's already starting now, taking off this summer. Next slide, please. And then for the report, similar to how we started the process, it looks backward to actually document all of this collaborative work done together to get here today, using call-out boxes throughout to bring in community feedback, lessons learned, and best practices. Next slide, please. And then the report looks forward as well to build from the framework of prior regional planning work to create the roadmap for putting the corridor tier pipeline to use in implementing the vision. And you can see the different pieces of the puzzle that work together to develop the transit supportive corridor environment on the slide here, and really set up for a successful high capacity investment. And these are really aligned with those key readiness indicators that we've been talking about throughout this process, rooted both in regional goals and in that federal criteria for funding. Next slide, please. The report also recommends specific actions that we can take to move corridors forward based on their readiness status to continue using the pipeline. So for those tier 3 and 4 developing in future corridors, that's where we really need to be thinking about developing density, ridership potential, and urban form through land use and transit-oriented development planning, working with community and stakeholders to identify needs and opportunities for the corridors, as well as beginning to establish project champions and coalitions that can support future work. And as these actions are undertaken, they complement other types of investments using the transit toolbox to add or increase service, and especially for those tier 3 corridors, making better bus improvements nearer term. And then for these corridors, as you can see in the graphic here on the left-hand side, this process is a cycle. So using the readiness criteria we've been speaking to through this process to really identify where to focus actions to be able to improve performance to meet the thresholds for that high capacity investment. And then those tier 2 corridors that are showing readiness for investment today, they can also still take action to support their competitiveness in the federal funding process, given that it and local match and partnerships have been so important to our history of successful implementation. Ultimately, going into project development, as you can see in the project pathway here. Next slide, please. And in addition to presenting to all of the advisory committees for this May portion of engagement, we've also actually followed up directly with all of the community, business, and stakeholder groups that we've engaged with to date. That way we could describe a little bit about how the feedback they provided was actually incorporated in the report and where they could find it as we invited additional review. And there'll be a few additional presentations that we've been invited to make throughout this next month. Next slide, please. The next step will be undergoing public review in July and August as part of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan update in preparation for adoption with that plan before the end of the year. And one other item that I'll mention that we'll be working on this summer as well is we're scoping an outline for future work that really builds from the strategy pipeline to look at a rapid bus implementation plan that really develops and creates a plan to advance the emerging priorities and looks towards things like identified funding that supports that. And that will be coming through the committees this summer. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. And I will go ahead and stop there to take comments and questions.
Thank you so much. That was great. Counselors, any questions, comments? I think for some of the counselors on JPACT and maybe even MPAC, they've seen this presentation before. I'll kick it off to Counselor Gonzalez.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to mention, President Peterson. I've seen this presentation so many times now. I feel like, Allie, next time I can go present with you, hopefully. Yeah, just really admired the tenacity with which we've engaged our partners in this policy. You know, I think it's aside from all the things we've said, like throughout all our presentations and whatnot, I think it's really important for us as a council to look at this as a tool as well, with the 2-year pause on tolling, and with all of the concerns that our local partners have raised on diversion, on local streets and capacity and those kind of things, that we do as much as possible to bring investments to the forefront, high capacity transit investments that offset the need to, enter those tolled throughways. So I know it's a dream and it's an offshoot, but it's an area that I think there's a lot of energy for us to look into, and will be great to have this nestled into our RTP and in our policy work for the next however many years we use it. So hopefully forever. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you so much. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple comments. First of all, although I like the slide that showed the different levels of bus service, and how they ramp up, and how they're tied into both high frequency, as one of the mayors in my district would point out, or one of the mayors on the west side would point out, high frequency as opposed to just high capacity. However, I look at that and it sort of implies that there is no continuity between the bus system and the light rail system that we're using, or that we intend to use, and sort of implies, and some people might get the impression that therefore the Southwest Corridor is sort of dropped off the table forever, and it's not a high capacity transit. I also have a problem that we always list WES as a high capacity transit system, but in fact, we really don't have any clear path forward as how to make it a high capacity transit system. So I think this is good as far as it goes, and it's going to do great for developing some of the corridors that we know we need to develop. I'm curious if we ever are going to run into a corridor that we think is going to have a guideway for buses. I haven't run into that yet. I haven't seen any projections. But probably my biggest one, and my biggest concern overall is that we are, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, we are putting the equivalent of a new city out on the west side up against Roy Rogers Road, 50,000 people over the next 10 or 15 years, and we have no projections for any kind of transit system in that neighborhood, or that, for that matter, to bypass the tunnel on Highway 26, which as the area on the west side continues to develop, particularly if we get North Plains developing, we're going to have to do something there. So that may not be high capacity, it may be high frequency, it may just be some sort of vision process. I don't know how it fits into high capacity transit at this point in time, but I think it's something that we have to recognize.
Thank you so much, Councillor. And I did just want to mention Southwest Corridor is definitely still a high priority. It is in our tier 1. We did hear, though, from some of our partners that the map, it could be a little bit more clear that showed that. So that is one change that we've made for the 2023 draft RTP update. So hopefully that will be a little bit easier to see.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other hands. I know there's been a lot of work on this, Allie, and much appreciated. We look forward to it being included in the update for the RTP. I would just want to close this out with how if you could give a quick update of how our partners are feeling about it at TriMet, and what do they see as, the ability to achieve this over time, and some of the stretch goals they have just for the next year.
Thank you, President Peterson. Yeah, TriMet has been a really close partner. They are actually dual partners with us in we have a project management team that oversees this effort. And we are very in alignment with TriMet. Actually, the project list that they submitted for the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan reflects the Tier 1 and Tier 2 priorities, reflecting those top 2 tiers as priorities. I will mention that the Tier 2 emerging priorities are right now in the strategic, so there is a little bit more work to do on the funding side and being able to identify commitments to advance those forward. So that is something that I think both TriMet and Metro are interested in the future. I do know as well, we are working on an appendix to include with the plan that details a little bit more too about the detail of the corridors, because there are some things that will be resolved in corridor planning, like corridor length, for instance, that when we go to implement, we need to look at specifically with a context sensitive lens. And that is also something that we are looking forward to doing in partnership together as well. And then as far as the implementation, we're really excited that Rapid Bus implementation plan, that will be a next step. That will really help us look at whether or not there's any opportunities to be a little bit more nimble with our implementation and think about how we can be efficient and use our resources to see if we can do a little bit more to advance this really great vision. And so we're really excited about that. Some of the things that we have a little bit more of a benefit, I guess, opportunity, because if we look at small starts, the timeline for that process is a little bit shorter. One of the things that we considered with the tiering and limiting some of the amount of corridors was the timelines based on the new starts and small starts processes and just the actual length of time that usually takes, as well as staff capacity. But small starts, that provides a lot of opportunity for that to go a little bit quicker as well, and something that TriMet's definitely interested in as well.
Great, thanks. Little Elsa said thank you too. She just woke up for her nap. Thank you, Allie. Anybody else with questions? All right. Well, seeing none, thank you so much, Allie. Much appreciated. We will move on to COO Communications. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President.
Oh.
A lot. Are we good? Okay. Thank you, President Peterson, for that introduction, also for the puppy show. I was hoping when you mentioned that you got her that we'd all get to see her fluffy little face. She's adorable. Felicidades. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So just one update for you today, Council. I just wanted to share a little bit about staff's response and work with Multnomah County and the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Staff is meeting with Multnomah County at a minimum of weekly. It's usually more than that, but we've sort of set that minimum. Staff have had multiple discussions with Multnomah County about immediate investments that can get services to the people who need them now, as well as investments that could be made to address gaps and challenges at the system level. For situational awareness, today is the deadline for Multnomah County to provide us with their initial corrective action plan response, and that response should include investment amounts and timelines. We plan to immediately vet their proposal against the goal to end the year as close as possible to the annual spend down target that they set. I just also want to acknowledge and give thanks to the Northwest Pilot Project for testifying today, as well as the other signatories to the letter that you received. What they shared really affirms Metro's observations of the functioning of this system thus far, and underscores the need for ongoing monitoring on our part, monitoring of Multnomah County to address those structural changes or structural challenges that seem to be hampering efforts to get money out the door and into the hands of organizations that can make a difference out there. So I plan to provide you with regular updates, and if there's any information that we can provide to you in your role, your oversight role in holding counties accountable to their plans and to their targets, please let me know. Happy to accommodate and provide you with any information that you need. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Marisa. I guess, as we move forward, I think staff to staff work is really important. I think elected to elected is also extremely important. So I would like to just request that we make sure that we have a direct communication between Chair Pedersen's office and the counselors that can join, just to have that conversation about how to move forward. This is finally our oversight, even though there are so many different levels of oversight, and it does squarely rest on our shoulders to make sure that we are helping move the ball forward. So I would just request that we set up that meeting and get face-to-face conversations going and continue them. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. We'll move on to Councilor Communications. If Councilor Rosenthal, if that's why you raised your hand.
Well, I raised my hand to see if there's potential to ask Marisa a question or two about her report.
Yes, you certainly can.
Two questions. One is, in the meetings we had last week with the city, they implied that some of their expenditures were a one-time thing. Is there any potential that could be more than a repeat expenditure on their part? And then the second question, are we going to provide a direct response or some detailed response to the article that was in the paper today about all the funding that is going unspent?
Thank you for that question, Councilor Rosenthal. Oops, I'm back again. Okay, sorry. So I'll take your first question first. I know that there are ongoing conversations between Multnomah County and the City of Portland about ways that they can continue to work together and new opportunities for new projects and new spending. I don't have, and I'm not sure that our staff has all the details yet from the City of Portland, although I believe that those have been communicated to Multnomah County. However, I believe that at this point, everything should be on the table. There is enough money in the system to accomplish multiple goals. And so we're doing our best to encourage the city and the county to work together to invest these dollars that the voters have provided to us. There will be, much more to come there, I'm sure, but there is no shortage of funds and there is no shortage of needs. And so we are just trying to create the conditions to allow that funding to be spent as effectively and quickly as possible. And then as for your other question about a response to the article, maybe we can chat about that offline with Kristen and discuss how you would like to respond.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Marisa? All right, with that, we'll move on to Councilor Communications. Thank you, Marisa. Anybody wanting to share? Councilor Gonzalez, then Councilor Lewis.
Nice. All right. This meeting's almost over, folks, but some important communications coming your way. First and foremost, it's really cool that our comms team and Metro leadership has led a partnership with the Hillsborough Hops to talk about water safety. And so on Saturday, we gave out like over 100 life jackets of all sizes to families that visited our booth. And it was jam-packed. It was crazy. It was so cool. Beautiful weather, and just a great way for Metro to be out in the community. As we know, drownings are, significant, especially in the hot summer months. And so spreading that water safety message has just been really, really great, and happy that we're taking a proactive leadership role in that space. And also President Peterson and I don't know what's wrong with my pronunciation today. Must be the Memorial Day weekend. So we on Thursday afternoon presented to the Portland Business Alliance on the RTP and had I think a really meaningful, positive discussion with some industry leaders around how the RTP supports goals of all stakeholders in our region. And I'll let President Peterson share more on that as well. But I think it was successful, and I'm hoping that our relationships with different stakeholders continue to grow as we recover. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware today is the hearing for the bill in Salem that would turn around the land swap. And that is something I'm here in Salem to testify against. And I will report back on Thursday how it goes.
Thank you, Councilor, for doing that. Much appreciated. Councilor Simpson.
I too want to extend my thanks to Councilor Lewis for going down and providing testimony on that. So thank you. And I want to just quickly say, yesterday was Memorial Day. Hopefully everybody took a moment to mourn and honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice so that we all can continue to do this work. So it's a day that holds importance for me and my family, having a number of folks served from World War II all the way through to now. And so hopefully everybody did take a moment to remember that 3-day weekend was about people making that sacrifice for us.
Thank you, Councilor, and thank you for your service and your entire family who have been in service to this country. Much appreciated. And to all of those watching out there, much appreciated. I was able to attend the Lake Oswego Memorial Day event at the memorial down at Foothills Park. It was, as always, very, very humbling. And one of the women who spoke, who served in Vietnam as a nurse and more, told stories of what she had encountered and what she had come up against, as well as the work to make sure that the memorial for the Vietnam veterans in DC is well taken care of, to make sure that it is honored and respected as it should be, and also made mention of thanking them and welcome home. I think that's an important part of every speaking opportunity that we have on this topic, is to make sure that folks know that they're welcome home, and because of the PTSD that they can come home with, as well as just their service. She also made mention of all that we've lost in all of the wars since the very beginning of this country, as well as the war she acknowledged that we are in right now, which is the war of folks owning guns that are actually meant for war and being used against our own residents of this country, which I thought took great courage. And I was thankful that she brought that up and mentioned that in that setting. So very, very, very thankful that she did. With that, counselors, thank you again for all that you do on a daily basis in your public service as well. With that, if there's nothing else good for the order, we will adjourn this meeting, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much.
Recording stopped.